Hello everyone, and welcome back to another continuation of my beat 'em up tutorial in Gamemaker Studio. Today we are going to go over how to add in a simple enemy and just kind of the theory and the principles that go behind that. So last video we talked about how to add in the hitbox, and now we're going to flesh that out along with a very basic enemy and just see how those systems work working together. So if we run the game right now, we'll see this. Excellent. So as you can see, this over here, this is our enemy right in front. And the sprite isn't different, nor is the AI really doing anything crazy. They're just punching straight forward constantly. And that is what we're going to accomplish today. As you can see, if we walk into the punch, the player gets hurt. The player even takes a little bit of knockback, and we're going to go over how to add that today. We can punch this enemy. So as you can see, he does his little hurt animation and then goes right back to his punching. And then what we can do is we'll also add in this attack, which is a jump kick. So if you can see, we jump and then we kick. And so we just kick the enemy out of the scene. So that's what we're going to be going over today. And I'm just going to go over how I did it so that you can set up your own AI on your own later. I am going to come back with another video about how I did it and just sort of different ways you can set up AI. But for now, we're just going to go for this very simple example where you now have something that can punch you and something that you can punch. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to clean up our room. So I believe in the last time we played around with this room, we actually had more of a, what we had was a simple hitbox right here, and that was just for testing purposes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually create the enemy object, and this is called obj underscore enemy. So before I go into showing you how to create that, let's just go to the player object and let's make some quick changes. So the first changes that we're going to make. So this is our create event. All of these things are fine. Solid list, blah blah blah, animation finished. Alright, so the player is going to get an option to punch in this version. So we're going to set up a hitbox. So my hitbox is equal to no one. So this is just going to store the ID of the attack hitbox we're going to use later. So we're going to set that up. Then what we're going to do is we're going to edit the get hurt function a little bit. So previously we should have had this ID variable in our hitbox, and that will store we're going to have this ID variable in our get hurt function, and that should store the ID of the hitbox that hurts us. So the reason we want to get that is we want to apply knockback in the correct direction, which is what we're doing here. And basically what we're doing is we're going to compare if the hitbox that hurt us is on our left or on our right. And so whatever that is, we're going to face the direction of the thing that just hurt us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit to our HSP. So in this case, I put HSP is equal to 60 times negative dir. So this is going to, if the player gets hit on the left, they're going to face left and go right 60 pixels based on HSP. So that's how that works. And then we have a similar thing here for thrown, where we actually don't need this part of the code because this already moves the player for us. Alright, so that's perfect. And then let's go to step. So we've added a few things to step that are going to be very important. So all of this stuff is the same, all of that stuff is the same. So hurt is going to run the same. It's when we get here to thrown that we're going to change some things. Actually, sorry, not thrown. We're going to go down to idle. Okay, so here is where we go to the attack state. And what I did is when we go to the punch state, we're going to make a hitbox. So basically what we're going to do is this function here is going to create hitboxes for us. So how you can create this script is go to your scripts, right click, create script right here, or Alt C if you want. And then this is my make hitbox script. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the target enemy. So this is the object that we want this hitbox to actually hurt. We're going to want to set up a sprite. So this is the sprite that we want the hitbox to use. And then we're going to set up scale. So this basically controls if the hitbox is going to face left or right. Now generally the way you do this is we're going to set up this instance. So this variable is just going to store the ID of the hitbox, which will get passed back into our myHitbox function, into our myHitbox variable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create on the layer at my position, on my layer, obj_hitbox. And then this section here, so this is what's called a struct. And this struct is actually going to, from here, we can actually edit the variables in the object. So there's actually two ways to do this. You could do it this way, or you could do it this way, where basically you just put, you could do it this way, where basically you put inst, so you're using that ID variable and you set its image x scale to the value. That's another way. But this struct is generally a cleaner and more efficient way to do it. So I'm going to use that. So image x scale is equal to scale. So that should make sure it's facing the right way. Sprite index is equal to sprite. That should make it the correct animation. And then the target object is equal to target enemy. So that will make sure that it's hitting the right object. And remember when you're making this to put semicolons instead of equal signs. There's no equal signs in that. Alright, and then we need to return underscore inst. So basically what this does is this just makes this variable accessible outside of the script. So all of that is stored here. So as you can see, basically what we do here is we just create our attack hitbox. So that's what we need to do there. And then what we can do is, not there, here in the in-air state. So in this case, the player is in the air, and we want the player to throw out a kick hitbox. And so what we do is we run the very same script. So same target, but a different hitbox, and then our same image scale. So this sends us to the flying kick state, and this gives us the correct hitbox. So the way this is handled is a little bit different, and we'll get into that more once we go to the hitbox sprite. Basically what this does is this makes a non-moving hitbox that just destroys itself when its animation ends. However, the problem is with our in-air state, with our flying kick state, is our hitbox, we don't really know how long it's going to stick around for. So what we want to do is, using this data, we're going to set the hitbox x and y to my x and y, so the hitbox actually stays with us. And then, at the end of the state, when we leave the flying kick state, we're going to delete my hitbox. Alright, so that's this script done, and that's the player step event done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to right click on our player, we're going to hit duplicate, and then we'll rename the duplicate of our player obj_enemy. So I'll give you a second to do that. So basically what we've done here is we've created another player object. So if we were to run this in our room right now, it would just run around. It wouldn't work correctly. So basically, for these kinds of games, the enemy object is just the player, but your keys don't control them. So like when you press up, left, right, and down, those keys don't control the enemy object. They only control the player. So how do we do this in our game? Well, it's actually very, very simple. To make the enemy object different, First, what we need to do is we need to delete the enum states. That can only be declared once. And right now it's declaring the player. So we want to make sure that our enemy is not declaring this enum. Then we're going to set all this. Here's the sprite stuff. You can change this very, very easily. Basically what I do in my game is I very minutely edit the sprites, and then these can all I just change up what values are in here. So this is just a very friendly way of being able to replace them very easily. All of this data is the same. This, of course, is the same my hitbox stuff, and then get hurt is very, very similar, very much in the same way. So something we do add here that's not in our player object is instance destroy my hitbox. Basically what this does here is this makes sure to destroy our hitbox. So our enemy is going to be constantly punching. When the enemy gets hurt, we want the hitbox to be destroyed so that when the player punches, the player doesn't get hurt from a phantom attack. And actually, we could probably add this code in the player as well. I just don't have it because for our example, it doesn't really make a difference. But we probably should add this code to the player as well. So for the throne, we do the exact same thing. So we make sure that both of those are the same. All right, next step. So almost everything we have in here is the same. One thing that we want to change is we want to make sure that our hitbox are actually hitting the player. So here, the same way that we set up the make the hitbox function in the player, we need to make sure that this is set up here. So my hitbox is equal to make hitbox, and we're going to make sure that it's targeting the player, not the enemy. We're going to use the same sprite. We're going to use our X scale. There, that's all good. That's fine. Up here, so as you can see, this is where we controlled the player in our player object. This is basically like the brain of our player. What I've gone and done is I've basically just commented out everything. I've commented out everything and replaced it all with false, except for down here in attack. So what this does is basically this chooses at random false, false, or true. So what that means is each step attack is either false, false, or true. So in our player, this is true if we are pressing the attack button. In the enemy, this is true based on essentially just random chance. And like what's great about this system is that if we wanted, we could make the enemy jump by just putting this to true. So if we run this game, so as you can see, now the enemy is constantly jumping. Now the enemy is constantly doing that because we set this jump key to true. So basically what we're going to do here in a later tutorial is we're going to come in and we're going to make a system that chooses what inputs to press based on a certain system. So we can come in and like code the brains here. But for now, we're just going to focus on getting this simple system up and running. So that's all that we have here. Everything else should basically be the same. All right, so let's go and look at the hitbox. That should be the final thing, the final piece to this puzzle. So we have to make a few changes. So beforehand, we should have a variable here that's called target object. What we're actually going to do is we're going to remove that declaration of that variable, and we're going to go here to variable definitions. So if you click here, it should open variable definitions. Should be able to click add, and in the variable name, we're going to use target underscore obj, and we're going to set that. We're going to set the type to asset, and we're going to set the default to, we'll just set it to player. It doesn't really matter, but that's how we basically set it up. So it should be called target underscore obj player. All right, all that looks good. So what does that mean? Basically, a variable definition is basically the same thing as setting it up in the create. The only real difference is this create event, something about the order of operations in Gamemaker makes it so that if we declare it here, then the way we're setting it up in the hitbox script won't run. So like this here, this line of code won't work if we just leave the target obj in the create event. So what we need to do is we need to move it down here so that it's processed in the way that Gamemaker needs it to be processed to edit this in our script. So that's how it goes. Damage to do is unused for now, but we're just going to continue. So next what I did is I want to make sure that different kinds of attacks do different things. So for now, I do have a punch and a hitbox and a flying kick hitbox here. So these are the two sprites I created. Now let me just go into how I created those. So for the punch, if we go into edit image, basically what I did is I duplicated the player punch sprite, and everywhere that I wanted there to be a damage frame, I went in and drew a red rectangle on top of it. And so for the flying kickbox, basically what I did is, we can see here, we want the attack frame to be every single frame. So we just set it up like this so that it's constantly attacking. And that is basically how that should work. And then what we can do here is in edit image, we can remove that by just hiding the layer. And what we do is we set the collision type to precise per frame. So that makes sure that every frame is precisely the rectangle we're using for collision. So that's just a way of making sure that the collisions function the way we want them to. So if we go back to our hitbox, so what we're going to want to do is we want to change the damage type. So if it's this kind of punch, we want the damage type to be the punch type. That's what we set up in the last video. If we want it to be a flying kick, we want the damage type to be thrown. We also set that up in the last video. Damaging the target instance. So this should mostly remain the same because this is what we set up in the last video, and it should find the correct target object. Alright, what's next? Alright, so here in the animation end. So what we're going to do is, last time we didn't have this animation end event. You can add the event by clicking add event. It's under other, animation end. And basically, once an attack is finished, we want to destroy the hitbox. However, there are a few attacks where we don't want the attack to delete the hitbox. So what I've done here is I could come back later and add a bunch of different special cases. So like if I have a bunch of different sprite hitboxes for my attack, I can add a bunch of different behavior here. That's why I used a switch state. But in this case, basically what this is saying is if it's a flying kick hitbox, don't destroy yourself. Otherwise, if it's the default, if it's anything besides this, then just destroy yourself when the animation ends. So that should be that all functioning. Alright, so that should be everything. That should be our enemy brains. That should be our player attacks. And if we run the game, we should be able to see as a result, alright, our enemy is still jumping like that. And they're occasionally punching. I suppose what I could do here is I could make sure that the hitbox, the my hitbox, is deleted. But if we punch this guy, you can see he goes to the hurt state. He does everything correctly. Beautiful. That's wonderful. And we can actually jump and kick. And there we go. Perfect. So, just a few more tidying up things we can do. So generally, in the hitbox, generally this will be invisible. So if you go here, you click visible, and then you won't be able to see the hitbox. That's generally how it works in these games. The hitbox is invisible. Um, Next, what we can do is we can make sure that if the state changes, it's not creating the hitbox. So we can just do instance underscore destroy my hitbox. So the reason this happens is the hitbox is created here if attack is true. But if attack is true and jump is true, then it's going to create this hitbox and then go to the in-air state. So basically the order here is what trips it up. But that should be just fine if we add that code. So now as we can see, now that little glitch doesn't happen. I'm also going to make him stop jumping because it's kind of annoying. Jump is false. Perfect. And then another thing we can do here is if we run the game, we can see that right here, logically, our player should be above the enemy. However, in this case, the enemy is always over our player. So what we need to do is we need to implement some kind of depth sorting so that this guy is shown in front of the player at the appropriate times. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our player. We're going to add a line of code. We can add it here at the top. That says my depth is equal to negative bbox underscore bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the enemy and we're going to add this same line. Depth is equal to negative bbox bottom. So what does this do? Basically what it does is it looks at the object sprite, and at the very bottom line of the sprite, it sets its depth to that. So negative depth is higher depth. And so if an object has negative depth, it's shown on top of the objects with more depth. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the depth is aligned with the feet, and then once that happens, the depth, it just all works. So if we run the game, we might see an error here. Perfect, okay. So this error comes from a very, very simple issue, and it comes with an issue that I left in to our make hitbox code. So if we go to our make hitbox, perfect. So instance create layer. So basically, Gamemaker has two systems. The first sorting system is by layer. So each layer that you create in your room is going to have a depth, and all the objects on that layer have that same depth. Now the issue with that is if we decide to change the depth of our objects, like we do here in code, that makes the object no longer on that layer. And we can't exactly use instance create layer if we are no longer on a layer. So therefore, we get that error. So how do we fix this? There's a number of ways. One way is we just use this instances. So this is the name of our instances layer, and that will make sure that it knows what layer to use when it creates the instances. Or you can just use depth. This number really doesn't matter because this part right here, whether you use layer or whether you use depth, is trying to understand how to draw the hitboxes if they need to be on top of something or if they need to be underneath something else. And that's not really an issue because as we set up here, our hitboxes are invisible. So it doesn't really matter. We just can't use the layer keyword when we create our hitboxes. So as you can see, that all works. We can take damage. We can, if I can reach this guy, give damage. And we can give multiple types of damage. There we go. Alright, perfect. In the next tutorial, hopefully we'll be able to talk more about giving a little bit more sophisticated AI. But I would definitely challenge you to play around with it and see how you can figure it out. See if you can use an if statement or a system to get those key presses in our enemy working. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and have a lovely evening.